Hey everyone, welcome to my Tale of One Immigrant. My single story is all about the difference of perception of the Chinese people between Singapore and the US. I grew up in Singapore. I grew up with Chinese people. My aunt's Chinese. My godmother was Chinese. I grew up going to schools with a majority of Chinese people. I grew up eating Chinese food. We cooked it in my home. And so I was very, very familiar with the Chinese culture and did not think of it as any separate than my life and my culture until I came to the US. And I was very, very surprised as to why in America, the Chinese were perceived very differently than the Chinese that I grew up with. One of the funniest things that I thought was that in America, everybody believed that the Chinese people were very retiring, not outspoken, and pretty mellow and quiet, and was completely the opposite of how I grew up. I mean, I grew up in markets where people shouted and the vendors shouted and there was a lot of noise, and so I never perceived the Chinese people as being quiet and retiring. I didn't perceive them as anything else but like everybody else that I grew up with. I grew up in a very multicultural, multi-ethnic environment where everybody was almost the same, even though we looked different. And there was no labels. There was no such thing as you're a Singapore Chinese or Singapore Malay or a Singapore Indian or a Singapore European. Everybody was a Singaporean. And so imagine my surprise when I came here. And so my perceptions of China and the Chinese people are like the pictures show. It's an ancient culture. They've contributed amazing things to the world, from art to history to technology inventions and things that we now use in our daily lives. As you can see from some of these pictures, right? Art, tea, cuisine, Tai Chi, drama, firecrackers, warriors, Kung Fu. All of these are outcomes of China. And what did the Chinese invent? The four great inventions of ancient China: gunpowder, paper, printing, and compass. It was an astronomically advanced civilization. They recorded observations of the comets, the solar eclipse, and the supernova. They also created the rudders to appear on Chinese ship models. What else? Acupuncture, the traditional Chinese medicine of inserting needles besides drugs. And this was done as early as BC in the Han Dynasty. They also invented the first sunglasses. Marco Polo, when he went to China, he said they were more technologically advanced than anywhere else in Western Europe. The Abascus. They've discovered alcohol. They also invented the clock. Metal, invention of mixing copper and tin and porcelain. And so why did the Chinese come to the U.S.? They came for three reasons. One was to come here, make some money, and send it back home to their poor families, or to go back to China with wealth and then to build their own empire there. And lastly, it was because of the Opium Wars. And the current impressions of China and the Chinese in the U.S. is that they're communistic. When they came here to build the railroads, no one wanted them. They were bullied. They were beaten up. Now, the Chinese are the most highly educated, earn higher median incomes than anybody else. They're highly involved in Silicon Valley, and they're least likely to affiliate themselves with any political parties. Here's a little story from one of our Chinese friends in the U.S. She's America. She didn't think she was anything else until she went to kindergarten, and then she was told that she was different, and that one of the boys actually made fun of her by saying ching, chang, ching, chang, chu. So it's interesting that the single story here is the American perception of the Chinese and the stories that they have propagated, and then the stories that I have. So as Chimamanda says, the single story creates stereotypes, and the problem is that not that they're untrue, but they're incomplete. But if we take the stories that I had and the American friends have of their Chinese friends, and maybe the Europeans have of the Chinese, and the South Americans, we might just get a very complete story of one of the oldest cultures in the world. And as Chimamanda says, I've always felt it impossible to engage properly with a place or a person without engaging with all of the stories of that place and that person. She's right, it does rob people of dignity. And it takes away the full picture of humanity. It emphasizes how we're different rather than how we're similar. And the sad part is, most of us are really the same. We just happen to look different. And that is my single story today. Thank you.